Former PepsiCo chair and CEO Indra Nooyi's new book, My Life in Full, Work, Family, and Our Future, hitting the shelves this week. Wall Street knows her for building Pepsi into one of the biggest food and beverage companies in the world, growing sales 80% over her 12 years as CEO, successfully fending off activist pressure to split the company in half. But in this memoir, the focus is her story and the parts of her life investors and consumers didn't see, being a wife, being a mother, a daughter, and all the demands that come with that while leading a Fortune 500 company. I sat down with NOOYI to discuss all of it and asked her whether she ever found that balance between work and home.
There is no balance. It's a juggling act. Somehow you've got to have all these balls in the air and learn how to juggle them so they don't drop. Sometimes they do drop too, so you've got to live with that. I think the key thing is to have a spouse that commits to equality in the home and supports you every step of the way. An entire ecosystem between family members, neighbors, the community, helping you with juggling all of these various priorities and responsibilities that you have, and somehow figuring out a way to stay current in the workforce. And it becomes difficult because you've got to remain a lifelong student, you've got a lot to read and absorb. And in my case, it was because I didn't sleep much, and I fortunately had a decent memory retention power. So somehow I put those all together and managed to keep all of these different parts of my life in harmony. Wasn't easy, but somehow managed to do it.
The pandemic has changed work life for so many people. It's distorted the work life, especially for women. Do you think on the other side it becomes harder or easier?
It's harder if there is no separation between your work and home in some shape or form, because if it's completely blended in, what happens is you end up being the one making all the sacrifices. When there's limited broadband access, the woman ends up being the person who gives up broadband access for the kids and the rest of the family. If somebody needs to have a birthday party planned or kids running around with problems, I'm noticing that women end up giving up what they have to do at their paid work to be able to keep the family going. I think, first of all, in families, people have to talk about equality if there is a partner involved. But many families are also single-parent families. So I think it's very, very difficult for them to navigate through all of this if there isn't some separation of work and home. So I'm a big believer that may not be all 5 days of the week, but some days of the week you have to go into work so that you can actually have a work life where you understand a company culture, understand who's on your team, and then come back home and work flexibly from home some days, but you always know you have the option of going to work in order to be able to work in peace, work in a focused way so you too can advance in your job.
Most developed nations, in fact, almost all developed nations, except for the U.S., have done a lot more when it comes to parental leave and universal child care and just more support for the family and for women in particular at home. Do you see this as a problem for corporate America or an American problem?
I think corporate America, with communities, states, NGOs, everybody has to come together, and families, all come together and address this problem as a systems problem. I think if you punt it to corporate America, then you're leaving behind all the government, people who work in government or state governments or who work in small and medium-sized enterprises. So you can't just say it's a corporate America problem. On the other hand, if you punt it to the federal government and say it's got to be a big governmental program, nothing ever happens, and it gets caught up in the politics. So I think this is one time everybody has to come together and say, what's a sensible way forward?